Hello everybody and welcome back to another exciting edition of Boyographic, the show in which I, Matt the Game Boy, talk you through the highs and lows of the Game Boy library, one cart at a time. This week it's no exception, we're looking at Pinocchio. If you really think about it, there are a lot of similarities between puppets and video game characters. They're essentially inanimate until a puppeteer or a player pulls a string or presses a button, which brings them to life. Of course, for video games, this analogy falls apart if you take into consideration animated cutscenes. Fortunately, much rarer are the cases of puppets coming to life outside of animation, making Pinocchio the perfect puppet for this comparison. Released in 1940, the animated musical is still revered today not only as one of Walt Disney's best, but as one of the greatest animated works of all time. For those of you in the dark about the story, it tells the tale of a carpenter Geppetto who wishes upon a star that his puppet were a real boy. Of course, this wish is granted by the Blue Fairy, who informs Geppetto that Pinocchio will only become a real boy if he proves himself to be brave, truthful and unselfish. Of course, it takes him the entire film, but Pinocchio eventually gets there. It's a story of morals, adventure, and the benefits of not being a literal jackass. Valuable lessons for boys and girls of all ages. It's no wonder, having acquired the Disney license to create games based on Aladdin, The Jungle Book and The Lion King, that Virgin Interactive would want to make a game out of this Disney classic. But while the movie is a high-ranking Disney classic, the video game adaptation is unfortunately nothing to write home about. Following the plot of the movie, which is told in a picture book format to the player, Pinocchio must get 3 badges of bravery, truthfulness, and unselfishness in order to become a real boy. This isn't the difficult part of the game to understand. The part of Pinocchio that will make you scratch your head is how Virgin Interactive took such a great adventure story and made it into the most dull experience imaginable. Over the course of 7 levels, you must platform and duck your way through the game's story in order to earn your mortality. Sounds fine, right? I mean, sure, there's platforming, but there's also a stage on a roller coaster at Pleasure Island, as well as a raft escape from Monstro the Whale. How can that be dull? Well, Game Boys and girls, Virgin found a way. It could simply be down to how easy the levels are to make Pinocchio's tedium ring through, but even cranking the game up to hard mode doesn't fix this issue with the game, so we're gonna have to dig a little bit deeper. Perhaps it's the game's pacing. As to capture the spirit of Pinocchio, Virgin Interactive pulled out all the stops in making our titular lie-teller walk just like in the movie, which is a joy to watch, but makes the game feel incredibly slow. Maybe it's the lack of any real threat to our wooden boy's progress from enemies with very easy attack patterns that allow him to keep on skipping through these levels. Or it could just be the fact that the level design feels incredibly uninspired, as if this game were just pushed out the door in the hopes the license would carry it. It certainly to me feels like the latter of these, as the game doesn't feature any credits or even a "the end" screen. It just skips very quickly back to the title card. It's not to say the bulk of the game is bad, it's just not exciting to play. The platforming is pretty paint by numbers, dodging enemies, collecting items to refill your health and earn lives, rinse and repeat. You surprisingly can't jump on enemies' heads to incapacitate them, so Pinocchio can't attack for the first level, only earning the ability to defend himself with the spinning kick in the later stages. But just because it's boring doesn't mean the game doesn't have any nice ideas. For example, the underwater level is probably the highlight of the game, taking inspiration heavily from games like Sonic and Donkey Kong Country in its walking upside down and sea enemy barrel replacements. But they also looked at games like DK Country and took its mine stages and put them in the worst possible way. The roller coaster level feels sluggish and draws out perhaps the game's biggest flaw. In trying to make the game look as visually impressive as its 16-bit older brothers on the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, Virgin Interactive put some effort into the graphics of Pinocchio, but to the game's detriment. Because everything looks detailed, there is no clear differentiation between anything in the game. It's difficult to read foreground from background, hazards from details, and in a few odd cases, platform from scenery. As mentioned, it comes to a head in the mine stage as you essentially need to hold down on the D-pad for most of the level, as there are a lot of low beams that will knock you out if you crash into them. However, they look almost identical to parts of the track, so they just blur into the level design, which can be incredibly frustrating as it's just one long sequence. The Monstro raft section is also rather annoying, as the jump of the sequence needs to be spot on or it's back to the start of the level. These annoying segments are balanced out by seemingly unlimited continues, but I'd just rather that they played better and challenged the player, instead of just coming across as rushed. It feels to me that Pinocchio is a response to Virgin Interactive's earlier works. Their games are usually incredibly difficult, bland to look at, and with subpar scores. While the music here is only better because, let's face it, Give a Little Whistle would sound great if it were performed by a musical ruler, the decreased difficulty and increased visuals are actually at odds with the gameplay. Pick it up if you see it cheap, but as this game's most exciting level is playing as Jiminy Cricket keeping moths away from a flame, I really can't recommend it. If you want a fun game based on this Disney classic, maybe it's worth looking to the 16-bit versions of the title, as despite not playing them, I can imagine they're where Virgin Interactive's budget went for this game. In the end, if this is what being a real boy looks like, Pinocchio was better off as firewood, as while he's got no strings to hold him down, it's lazy level design and overly detailed levels that will make both him and you fret and frown. That being said, this game was kindly donated to me by my good friend Jeeb, whose channel you should definitely check out if you speak French, as his production values put mine to shame. It's called Pocket Fighter, and he looks at Game Boy fighting games. Besides that, he also posts old ads and other interesting tidbits that can be enjoyed by us non-Frenchies. Hoorah! Go check him out and tell him the Game Boy sent you. And that brings us to the end of another exciting episode of Boyographic on a subpar game. I hope you've enjoyed anyways, folks. If you have, please subscribe and share the channel with others you think may be interested, as this is how it gets around. If you haven't already, please check out some more of our Boyographic videos where I look at the highs and lows of the Game Boy library, one card at a time, usually published every weekend. Or you can check out some of our Boy Curious videos where I look at bootlegs and oddities for the system, as well as our All the Glory videos, where I play through a game, cut out all of the deaths, leaving you with none of the faff, but all of the glory. Until next week, Game Boys and Girls, you can also find me on Twitter at Gameboy, on Instagram and Facebook at the same places. Until then, however, good luck with gaming and game on.